clinical approach to acyanotic congenital heart disease. Actually, it was supposed to be cyanotic congenital heart disease. Because of yesterday's extensive discussion on cyanotic congenital heart disease by All India Institute, we changed the topic today to acyanotic congenital heart disease. So, congenital heart disease has an incidence of 8 to 10 per 1,000 live births. This excludes two most common congenital heart diseases like bicuspid aortic valve, which occurs in 1 to 2% of the population, and mitral valve collapse. Among these, 1/3 are critical lesions which do not survive without treatment. On the other hand, there are simple lesions like ASD, small VSD, pulmonary stenosis, bicuspid aortic valve. They may be detected incidentally in adults. They will not be symptomatic during childhood. So, what is the etiology of congenital heart disease? Briefly, because this is important in assessing the history. Most of them are unknown. Majority, that means more than 85%. Small percentage could be due to chromosomal anomalies. Most common are Down syndrome, where 40 to 50% of the patients have congenital heart disease. Maternal illnesses like first trimester rubella can cause congenital heart disease, like PDA, peripheral pulmonary stenosis, ASD, VSD, and sometimes other reasons. Diabetes, patients mother with diabetes have higher incidence of congenital heart disease. Patients with SLE can have congenital heart block, especially when they have anti-LA and anti-RO antibodies. Maternal drug intake like anticonvulsant, valproic acid, phenytoin, other drugs like lithium, alcohol, vitamin A excess can cause congenital heart disease in the fetus. Advanced maternal and paternal age also is a risk factor for congenital heart disease. Family history of congenital heart disease is important. If it is autosomal dominant, the risk to the fetus is 50%. Otherwise, sporadic cases, it is around 3 to 5%. It's slightly higher in obstructive lesions, up to 10 to 20%. History of consanguinity is important, especially in patients with autosomal recessive disorders. So when we approach congenital heart disease, 5 basic questions should be asked. 1, whether the child is acyanotic or cyanotic. Here cyanotic means we have to check the oxygen saturation because clinically cyanosis can be detected only when it is saturation is less than 85%, that too when hemoglobin level is normal. So between 85 to 95%, we need a pulse oximetry to check the oxygen saturation. Second, whether the pulmonary blood flow is increased or not. Third, whether the lesion is arising from the right or left side of the heart. Fourth, which is the dominant ventricle. This is more relevant in patients with congenital cyanotic heart disease. And finally, whether there is pulmonary hypertension is there or not. So we move on to acyanotic congenital heart disease. This includes a vast array of conditions. Still, we can divide broadly into 3 categories. Shunt lesions, which is the most common, may occupy around 50% of the congenital heart diseases. Next, obstructive lesions, which may be on the left side or right side, and remaining other lesions, again can be on the left side or right side. So the shunt lesions, when we say shunt lesions, it is left to right shunt lesions because the right to left shunt causes systemic desaturation and leads to cyanosis. So shunt lesions, when we talk about, it can be classified into pre-tricuspid and post-tricuspid. In pre-tricuspid shunt, the shunt reaches the right side of the heart proximal to the tricuspid valve, the atrial level. It causes volume overload of the right-sided chambers. The most common pre-tricuspid shunt is atrial septal defect, which is most common in adults. The commonest being Austin secunda. Partial anomalous pulmonary venous connection. Here, one or more of the pulmonary veins drain to right atrium either directly or through the systemic veins. This includes Scimitar syndrome. Here, the pulmonary veins from whole of right line drains to the IVC. The name comes from the appearance, radiological appearance like a Turkish sword. Other rare pre-tricuspid shunt could be right rupture sinus of Valsalva or coronary AV fistula, which may drain to right atrium daily. Then coming to the post-tricuspid shunts, here the volume overload occurs on the left side, left ventricle, in left atrium. PST is the most common congenital heart disease, occurring in 30% of the congenital heart diseases. Perimembranous VSD accounts for about 80% of the VSDs. Trabecular subpulmonic and inlet septum VSDs are less common. So a special type of VSD is from left ventricle to right atrium, either through the atrioventricular septum or through the septal leaflet of the tricuspid. It's popularly known as Gerpot's defect. Post-tricuspid shunt lesions can also occur at aortopulmonary level, more common as PDA. Aortopulmonary window occurs between the proximal aorta and pulmonary artery just above the pulmonary and aortic valves. Shunts can also occur at multiple levels, like in complete AV canal defect. There are some rare shunt lesions, like shunt between the aortic root and right heart. Here, rupture sinus of Valsalva aneurysm, either it can rupture into right ventricle or right atrium, most commonly from the right coronary sinus, most often slices to the right ventricle and rarely into right atrium. Whereas, sinus of Valsalva aneurysm from the non-coronary sinus always drains to the right atrium. Similarly, coronary AV fistula can drain to right ventricle or right atrium, and rarely to pulmonary artery. So now moving on to the obstructive lesions. This can occur on the left side or right side. Left-sided, it can be outflow or inflow. Left-sided outflow obstruction is more common. It occurs because of valvar aortic stenosis. The most common cause is bicuspid aortic valve. In neonates and infants, there can be stenosis with unicuspid valve, and sometimes even the tri-leaflet valve can cause aortic stenosis. In children, there can be subvalvar aortic stenosis due to discrete subaortic membrane. Discrete subaortic membrane or sometimes subaortic tunnel. Supravalvular aortic stenosis occurs in patients with Williams syndrome. Here, usually there is hourglass narrowing of the spinotubular junction. Rarely there can be membrane, or sometimes diffuse hyperplasia of the descending aorta. So these are rare causes for LVOT obstruction. Coarctation of aorta is narrowing at the level of the descending thoracic aorta at just below the left subclavian artery. Left-sided inflow obstructions are rare. It could be mitral stenosis. Congenital mitral stenosis is rare. The most common cause there is a short chordae and reduced or absent intercaudal space. Other causes are parachute mitral valve, where all papillary muscles are attached to a single, all chordae are attached to a single papillary muscle. It could be due to supramitral ring, double orifice mitral valve, or mitral arcade. The second common cause for mitral stenosis or left-sided inflow obstruction is called triatriatum. Here there is a membrane in the left atrium which separates the proximal chamber which receives the pulmonary veins from the distal chamber which has a left atrial appendage. The severity depends on the size of the foramen between these chambers in the membrane. The rarest cause of left-sided inflow obstruction is pulmonary vein stenosis. One of the pulmonary veins can get stenosed congenitally, and all these cause obstruction to the inflow and result in pulmonary venous congestion. And obstructive lesions can be right-sided. Right-sided outflow obstructions are fairly common. Most common is valva. Here, survival into adult life is rule. usually don't present during younger age. The less common causes are infundibular stenosis and subinfundibular stenosis, which causes double chamber right ventricle. That is a outflow chamber and the inflow chamber. Rarely there can be peripheral pulmonary stenosis occurring in the main pulmonary artery or its branches. Next, we will move on to the regurgitant lesions. These are less common conditions. The left side mitral regurgitation, or sometimes we say left AV valve regurgitation, especially in congenitally corrected transposition vessels. What are the causes for mitral regurgitation? Congenital causes, usually asked question in the exam also. Commonly, it's endocardial cushion defects, that is ostium primum ASD, anterior mitral leaf defects. Sometimes there can be isolated cleft in the anterior mitral leaf causing mitral regurgitation. There may be other abnormalities of the mitral apparatus, MVP or other lesions which we discussed in mitral stenosis. As I already told, congenitally corrected transposition of blood vessels can have left AV valve regurgitation in nearly 90% of the patients. It increases with increasing age. Left-sided regurgitant lesions due to aortic regurgitation is most commonly due to bicuspid aortic valve, sometimes unicuspid, tricuspid, quadricuspid valves can cause that. Rarely then can be aortic ventricular tunnel, which contributes to regurgitation from aorta through the tunnel into the left ventricle. Subvalvular aortic stenosis due to a discrete membrane can cause AR in more than 70% of the patients due to damage to the adjacent valve. Subpulmonic and subaortic VSTs can have AR due to prolapse of one of the leaflets. Most often it is right coronary cusp and sometimes non-coronary cusp due to lack of support and due to Venturi effect of the VST jet. On the right side, regurgitant lesions are more common in the tricuspid valve, exemplified by Epstein's anomaly of the tricuspid valve. Here, the septal and the posterior leaflet is below the mitral valve by more than 8 mm per meter square. Normally, also tricuspid valve is more apical than the mitral valve. But in Epstein's anomaly, the displacement is more and it should be more than 8 mm per meter square or more. They may be cyanotic or acyanotic. Other tricuspid valve abnormalities causing tricuspid regurgitation could be dysplasia or rarely tricuspid prolapse. Congenital pulmonary valve regurgitation is rare. Idiopathic dilatation of pulmonary artery can be one of the causes. Other more complex diseases like corrected transposition, where there is double discordance, that is atrioventricular discordance and ventriculo-arterial discordance. So the systemic ventricle is now right ventricle. Morphological right ventricle is on the left side and morphological left ventricle is on the right side. So they may have associated VST, pulmonary stenosis, usually subvalvular, and most often left AV valve regurgitation. And this may be associated with dysfunction of the morphological right ventricle. They also have various degrees of AV block, up to 75% of the patients, and 30% will have complete heart block. And per year, there is 2% risk of complete heart block. Rarely, there can be congenital absence of pericardium, which may be partial or complete. Usually, they are asymptomatic, sometimes they may have symptoms. Systemic venous anomalies like LSVC, interrupted IVC do not cause symptoms usually. And coronary anomalies, most important being ALCAPA, that is anomalous left coronary artery arising from pulmonary artery, can cause severe heart failure during first month of life, after first month of life. And congenital complete heart block can occur in children. Okay, There either can be combination lesions. These are the ones which are kept for exams usually, like large VSD with mild to moderate pulmonary valvular stenosis. Here the findings will be like large ASD, but in addition they may have an ejection click and the murmur is louder with a trill. ASD with mitral regurgitation. This MR could be because of NDP, which is seen in around 15 to 20% of first and second ASDs. It could be due to primum ASD with the cleft mitral valve and maybe associated rheumatic anemia. Rheumatic heart disease being so common in our country. Then it could be ASD with MS, Gutenberg syndrome. Here the mitral stenosis is always acquired. Okay, combination presents more like a ASD with a large left right shunt. Difficult to get the classical findings of mitral stenosis. Other combinations could be VSD with pulmonary stenosis and VSD with aortic regurgitation. Another favorite question asked in exam is Schoen's complex. What is Schoen's complex? There is obstruction at multiple levels on the left side, like supramitral ring, parachute mitral valve, aortic stenosis, and coarctation of aorta. So that is about the concisely about all the aortic congenital heart diseases. Now, how do we approach? We need to approach systematically with a good antenatal and postnatal history, thorough physical examination, ECG and X-ray becomes part of the clinical examination. Echocardiography is almost always diagnostic. CT and MRI are needed only in selected cases. And cardiac catheterization is rarely needed nowadays with a good echo diagnosis. Antenatal history, as we already discussed, look for consanguinity, maternal illnesses, maternal drug intake, and congenital heart disease in the family. Majority of small to moderate shunt lesions and obstructive lesions comprise most of the congenital heart diseases, maybe asymptomatic in early life. Large shunts, like large VSD, large PDA, present in heart failure at 4 to 8 weeks after the decrease in pulmonary vascular resistance. Remember, they do not cause heart failure on day 1 or during first week. Because the shunt to be established, the PVR should become almost near normal. At birth, the pulmonary vascular resistance is systemic. With the first breath, it starts falling, and by 4 to 6 weeks, it reaches the adult normal value of about 3 Wood units, 1 to 3 Wood units. So the shunt lesions develop heart failure after the fall in pulmonary vascular resistance. So the causes of heart failure on day 1 and during first week of birth or after birth are different. Okay. Some of the lesions like ASD, PS may not make their appearance till the adult life. So how do you ask for history of heart failure? Heart failure during infancy is different than in heart failure in adults. The most common activity in the baby is feeding. So they will have feeding difficulties, classically described as subthreats cycle. They can have tachypnea, or sweating while feeding, and failure to gain weight. This is seen in large VSDs, PDAs, and AV canal, complete AV canal defect. Moderate to large VSDs can also have recurrent respiratory infections, the definition of which is 3 or more lower respiratory tract infections per year, which needs antibiotic therapy without hospitalization. A word about VSD with heart failure. This is the most common cause of heart failure in the infant. 10% of them suffer if untreated. But symptoms may improve by end of 1 year due to decrease in pulmonary blood flow. This happens either because of spontaneous closure or decrease in size, which occurs in majority of small to moderate size VSDs and 10% of large VSDs. And other unfavorable natural histories, development of pulmonary vascular disease. Eventually, they may develop ISL memorization. And a small percentage of patients with VSD, especially the malaligned VSD, may develop RUOT obstruction due to hypertrophy of the muscle bundles. It's called as Guzzel's phenomenon. Critical aortic stenosis or severe coarctation of aorta may present with heart failure during first week of life after the duct closes. First week, second week, heart failure is due to either critical aortic stenosis or severe coarctation of aorta. ALCAPA, that is anomalous left coronary artery arising from the pulmonary artery, again develops heart failure after the pulmonary vascular resistance drops at 1 to 2 months. They develop severe left-sided heart failure because there is decreased blood flow in the left coronary artery. The blood flows from the right coronary artery through the collaterals into the left coronary artery and reaches the pulmonary artery. So there is severe ischemia in the left coronary artery territory. So they develop severe LV dysfunction, MR, and develop left-sided heart failure. So as they grow older, they may develop palpitation, fatigue, or dyspnea because of volume overload of ventricles, either because of shunt lesions or due to regurgitant lesions. Whereas in obstructive lesions, there may be exertion of chest pain, dyspnea, and giddiness. As we classically see in adults with aortic stenosis or exertional syncope. So some of the children or adults may present with infective endocarditis, especially in patients with small VSD, PDA, or bicuspid aortic valve. Till then, they may be asymptomatic. Arrhythmias are common in Epstein's anomaly and ASD after the age of 40 years in ASD. So they may develop heart failure in later life. Am I audible? So heart failure in adults can be because of ASD with atrial arrhythmias or development of mild to moderate pulmonary hypertension. ASDs are usually asymptomatic, especially Austin second and sinus defects can be asymptomatic at the fourth decade. Then they start developing symptoms because one, the left ventricular compliance reduces, so the left to right shunt increases. Second, development of atrial arrhythmias. Third, development of mild to moderate pulmonary hypertension. The shunt in ASD, left to right shunt, depends on the compliance of the ventricles. If the compliance of the left ventricle decreases, then the left to right shunt increases. So they may even present with severe pulmonary hypertension in large shunts like PST, PDA, AP window if they are not treated during early life. So many of congenital heart diseases may be asymptomatic. So somebody might auscultate and pick up a murmur, like a small VSD called Maladini Doja, which is loud pansystolic murmur or a continuous murmur of PDA. Or sometimes an abnormal ECG. If ECG is taken for some other reason, we may pick up some findings in ECG or an abnormal chest X-ray. So coming to general examination, there may be dysmorphic features. Congenital heart disease acyanotic can be syndromic in 18%. The more common symptoms are cold cramp, where there is fingerization of the thumb or absent thumb, absent radius. The most common congenital heart disease is Austin second ASD, Down syndrome, AV canal defect. In fact, AV canal defect will have Down syndrome in nearly half of the patients. Ellis-1-Creveld syndrome is an autosomal recessive disorder. It's associated with ostium primum ASD. I will show an illustration of Ellis-1-Creveld syndrome. Turner syndrome, which is associated with coarctation of aorta. Noodles, called male Turners, though it occurs in both males and females. It's autosomal dominant. It's associated most commonly with valvular PS with a dysplastic pulmonary valve. It can also be associated with ASD, VSD, and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. This is the only syndromic cause for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Supravalvular AS is seen in Williams syndrome. Children with abnormal phase called Elfin phase. They can have supravalvular aortic stenosis, and peripheral pulmonary stenosis. So this is called Oram syndrome. You can see the fingerization of the thumb and absent thumb. These patients are prone for ostium secundum. This is Ellis Van Creveld syndrome, where they will have short stature, polydactyly, syndactyly, normal dentition, and multiple frenulae. The most common lesions are ostium primum ASD and common HD, which is cyanotic. Ostium primum is acyanotic. So coming to the pulse and blood pressure, bounding pulse with white pulse pressure, you all know it is because of aortic regurgitation. PDA with moderate to large left-right shunt can have typical features of bounding pulse. AP window, aortopulmonary window, most of them, nearly 90% of them are non-restrictive. So hardly 5 to 10% may have significant left-right shunt to cause bounding pulse. And ruptured sinus of pulse can have typical features of aortic regurgitation. Slow rising, low volume pulse indicates severe aortic stenosis. In children, it may be difficult to appreciate because of the hyperdynamic circulation and so associated AR also masks finding. Slow pulse rate seen in congenital rectal transposition or congenital complete. So always look for radiofemoral delay, especially when patient is upper limb hypertension. Look for the lower limb pulses. This always miss because very often we pick up a coarctation of aorta in adults when we are trying to do some coronary angiogram for a patient with chest pain or hypertension. So always look for lower limb pulses. And sometimes the left upper limb BP may be less than the right upper limb BP. This is classically seen in supravalvular aortic stenosis because of the Coyanda effect. The jet in supravalvular AS, the jet tries to adhere to the wall and preferentially flows into the right innominate artery. So the right common carotid and right upper limb BP, right upper limb pulses are better felt than the left upper limb pulses, and the left upper limb BP is less than the right upper limb blood pressure. Same thing can happen in coarctation with left subclavian artery arising distal to the coarctation. Usually, coarctation occurs distal to left subclavian. Sometimes the left subclavian origin can be distal to the coarctation. Rarely, even the right subclavian artery. 3% of patients with coarctation can occur, originate from the aorta distal to the coarctation. JVP. What are the causes of prominent A waves? Whenever there is forceful atrial contraction against resistance, you get prominent A waves. This occurs in severe pulmonary stenosis or severe pulmonary hypertension. When there is right ventricular hypertrophy, this occurs only in intact ventricular septum. Prominent V waves are classical finding in tricuspid regurgitation. ASD with mitral regurgitation behaves like TR because now the MR jet enters the left atrium. There is non-restrictive ASD, and same is transmitted to the JV. Classically, in Cherbourg defect, you are asked what is the type of JVP you get. Usually, expected answer is prominent V wave. But Perloff says because the right atrium accommodates the compliance and the volume increases, compliance is better, so it can accommodate without increasing the right atrial pressure. So this is prominent V wave is rarely seen. In atrial septal defect, A and B are equal because normally left atrial pressure pulse has a more prominent V than the A, whereas right atrial pulse has a prominent A. So now there is left atrialization of the right atrial pulse, so A and B will be equal. Cannon waves, they are not same as prominent A waves. They occur when there is atrial contraction against closed AV valve. So it will be systolic. So Cannon waves, irregular Cannon waves are seen in complete heart block. JVP is largely normal in ventricular septal defect and Epstein's anomaly. Even if there is severe tricuspid regurgitation in Epstein's anomaly, you don't see a prominent V wave because it is dampened in the large atrialized RV, and this TRZ is low pressure TR originating from a hyperplastic RV. So normally you don't see prominent V waves in JVP in Epstein's anomaly. Coming to the precordial examination. If you see a prominent precordial bulge with hyperdynamic precordium, think of large post-tricuspid shunts like VSD, PD. If the apical impulse is shifted out down with a hyperdynamic character, think of moderate to large VSD and PD, and also severe regurgitant lesions like AR and MR. Heaving apical impulse is a feature of severe aortic stenosis, as in adults. Okay. Left parasternal pulsations. Usually in left parasternal, you have to differentiate pulsations from heave. Pulsations occur whenever there is RV volume overload, classically seen in atrial septal defect. It may also be seen in severe TR and pulmonary regurgitation. Whereas left parasternal heave occurs in RV pressure overload. Here, the lift is more than 50% of the systole. So the heave indicates RV pressure overload, and it's classically seen in severe pulmonary stenosis and pulmonary hypertension with the intact ventricular septum. When VSD patients have PS or VSD patients have PH, the right ventricular heave is not marked because the RV pressure does not become suprasystolic. Left second space pulsations occur whenever there is increased flow or increased pressure in the pulmonary artery. So this happens in large left to right shunts or in pulmonary hypertension. Rarely, aortic pulsation may be prominently felt in left second space due to corrected transposition of the great vessels, where the aorta is anterior to the pulmonary artery. It is felt in the left second space, usually asked question again. Left third space pulsation, one of the causes is Epstein's anomaly. Other causes are toxic absent pulmonary valve, that is cyanotic, and endomyocardial fibrosis. So in Epstein's anomaly, because RUOT is prominent, you can get left third space pulsation. Suprasternal pulsations, again because of increased flow or increased pressure, can be seen in AR, patent ductus arteriosus, and coarctation of aorta. Coming to second heart sound, I am selecting second heart sound before other sounds because this is the most important heart sound to differentiate various lesions. The most important sound in the diagnosis of congenital heart disease, both cyanotic and acyanotic. First, when you get a wide fixed plate, that is a sine qua non of atrial septal defect. Why is it wide? There is increase in hangout interval because pulmonary capacitance and compliance is markedly increased. Why is it fixed? As I already told, the left to right shunt depends on the compliance of the right ventricle. During inspiration, there is increased venous return, so the left to right shunt decreases. During expiration, there is decrease in venous return, so the left to right shunt increases. So the proportional change in the left to right shunt, and ultimately the RV filling and RV output remains the same throughout the respiratory cycle. So the second sound is fixed. Another reason is hangout interval is already at its maximum. So this causes fixed splitting of the second sound. And there are some conditions where you get wide variable split of the second sound, that is partial anomalous pulmonary venous connection. Here again the P2 is delayed because of increase in hangout interval, severe mitral regurgitation. Here, because of the shortened ejection time, A2 occurs early and you have a wide variable split of the second sound. Moderate to large VSD with a normal pulmonary vascular resistance can also have an early A2 because of shortened ejection time. In Epstein's anomaly, second sound is wide split because of the right conference block. Sometimes P2 may be soft in these patients because the pulmonary blood flow is reduced. Small VSD, small PDA, mild obstruction can have a normal split of the second sound. In pulmonary stenosis, the split second sound is very important in the diagnosis. The split goes on increasing with the increasing severity of the pulmonary stenosis. Initially, it is wide split because of delayed P2 due to increasing hangout interval due to dilated pulmonary arteries. In severe pulmonary stenosis, P2 is maximally, S2 is maximally split because of prolonged mechanical systole of the right ventricle. So S2 split, one because of increased hangout interval due to dilated pulmonary arteries, second because of prolonged mechanical systole. This is in severe pulmonary stenosis. As the severity increases, the P2 becomes softer. And in severe PS, P2 may be inaudible. And A2 is merged in the murmur, so second sound is hardly heard in pulmonary area. Whereas in severe aortic stenosis, S2 may be single because A2 is delayed, or it can be paradoxically split. Sometimes A2 may be muffled when the aortic valve becomes calcified in later life. In pulmonary hypertension, when the patient develops pulmonary hypertension in shunt lesions, P2 becomes loud and the split narrows. Other heart sounds. LVS3 is heard in VSD or PDA with large left to right shunts. If you hear LVS3 in VSD or PDA, you can say that the shunt is more than twice one. LVS4 is a feature of severe aortic stenosis. On the right side, in large ASD, S1 is split and T1 is loud. That is, the tricuspid component is loud because there is a large flow across the tricuspid valve and the leaflets are kept open till the end of systole at the beginning of diastole. You get a loud T1. RVS4 is again a feature of severe PS of PH with an intact interventricular septum. In Epstein's anomaly, classically you hear multiple sound because S1 is split with a loud T1 component called sail sound. S2 is split because of RBBB. There may be RVS3 and RVS4, which may sometimes merge to cause a short mid-diastolic murmur. What are the causes for ejection flicks? Bicuspid aortic valve. Classically, you hear a ejection flick, which is best heard in the apex, and it does not move with respiration, called constant ejection flick. Whereas in valvular PS, you have a phasic ejection flick. That means it moves with respiration. This is the only event on the right side which decreases on inspiration. Usually, this is asked in the exam. Why does it decrease on inspiration? Because during inspiration, there is increased venous return, RV, end diastolic pressure increases, and it partially pushes the leaflet to a partially open position. So during inspiration, flick is soft, better heard during expiration. Severe pulmonary hypertension, again you have a flick which is vascular, which is constant. It does not move with respiration because the pulmonary artery diastolic pressure is high. RV diastolic pressure cannot open the pulmonary valve premature. Non-ejection flick is a feature of mitral valve prolapse, best heard in the apex. Rarely, interatrial septic or interventricular septic aneurysms may cause some flicks. So coming to the murmurs. Murmurs can be pansystolic, early systolic, or late systolic, and ejection systolic. What are the causes of pansystolic? If you hear a pansystolic murmur in the apex, think of cleft mitral valve or mitral valve prolapse. Here, usually you hear it. Like if it is a polosystolic prolapse, then the clip may fuse with the S1 and you may get a loud S1. Then another cause of systolic murmur in the apex is corrected transposition of great vessels with left AV valve regurgitation. If you hear a pansystolic murmur in the left sternal border, it is due to small to moderate VSD depending on the level, whether it is perimembranous or muscular VSD. Perimembranous VSD murmur is best heard in the left third intercostal space. It is muscular or inlet VSD murmur is heard lower down. Sometimes in VSD, you may hear just an early systolic murmur. This may occur in small muscular VSD because during contraction, the VSD can get closed in the later part of systole. Large non-restrictive VSD can have only early systolic murmur because the gradient is less than 20 mm. Closing down VSD can also have a short early systolic murmur. Pansystolic murmur in tricuspid area is classically because of TR, and it is supposed to increase in inspiration because of increased venous return. Whereas in Epstein's anomaly, the systolic murmur may be only early systolic because it's a low pressure TR coming from a hypoplastic or small arm. Late systolic murmur preceded by a click in the apex is classical finding in mitral valve collapse. So coming to ejection systolic murmur, this is seen in LVOT and RVOT obstructions. Here, the murmur becomes longer, louder, and late peaking as the severity of the lesion increases. In severe AS, in severe PS, murmur is long, loud, and peaks in the second half of systole. In AS, the site of the murmur depends on the level of obstruction. If it is subvalvular, murmur is heard best in the left third and fourth intercostal spaces. If it is valvular, it can be heard in the left second or right second intercostal space. If it is supravalvular, it is heard best in the right infraclavicular and sometimes in the neck. But always the murmur radiates to the carotids. Whereas in pulmonary stenosis, again the site of the murmur depends on the site of the stenosis. If it is valvular, it is best heard in the left second space. If it is infundibular, it is best heard in the left third space. If it is subinfundibular, it is heard lower down. Peripheral pulmonary stenosis, the murmur may be heard in the back, usually a systolic murmur, rarely continuous murmur. Here the murmur in valvular PS, the murmur radiates to the left, towards the left clavicle. Sometimes ejection systolic murmur in pulmonary area could be due to increased pulmonary blood flow, classically seen in ASD and partial anomalous pulmonary venous connection. In these conditions, there is no shunt murmur, it is always a flow murmur. In ASD, you hear a flow murmur across the pulmonary valve and flow murmur across the tricuspid valve, which we will be discussing shortly. And another cause of ejection systolic murmur in pulmonary area is subpulmonic VSD. Here it almost sounds like an ejection systolic murmur. With a wide split second sound, it can be mistaken for a ASD, but it is very distinct. Diastolic murmurs, if it is heard in apex, it is usually due to a large shunt. In VSD and PDA with a large shunt of more than 2:1, you hear a flow murmur because of increased flow across the mitral valve. Should always look for this MDM in patients with large VSD or PDA. It is usually preceded by a S3. And LV is usually dilated and hyperdynamic. So these are the two features make you think of a large shunt. One is dilated hyperdynamic LV. Second is S3 and MDM in the apex. Rare cause of MDM in the apex could be congenital mitral stenosis or hot triad. In tricuspid area, again, if you hear a MDM in tricuspid area in patients with ASD, it indicates a shunt more than 2:1. Again, a flow murmur because of large flow across the tricuspid valve. Finally, early diastolic murmur in the left sternal border is more likely to be AR rather than PR. Continuous murmur. The most common cause of continuous murmur is PDA. If you have these three features, it's likely to be ductus. One, site. It's heard in the left infraclavicular, left first and second intercostal space. PDA murmur peaks around the second sound. And there will be multiple eddy sounds, click-like sounds around the second sound because of jets hitting in the pulmonary. So, what is the definition of continuous murmur? The murmur starts in systole, continues uninterruptedly through the second sound into any part of diastole. It need not occupy the whole of systole or whole of diastole. The most important is continues uninterruptedly through the second sound, and the character of the murmur remains same throughout the both during systole and diastole. When patients with PDA develop pulmonary hypertension, the murmur initially becomes systolic, and there is bidirectional shunt or right direction, the murmur disappears. Other causes of continuous murmur is AP window. small percentage because most of them are non-restrictive. Restrictive AP window to have a continuous murmur in the left third intercostal space. Ruptured sinus of Valsalva aneurysm to the right atrium or right ventricle can have a loud continuous murmur lower down in the third space. Better heard on the right side when it ruptures to the right atrium, better heard on the left side when it ruptures to the right ventricle. Ordinary AV fistula to right-sided chambers can have a continuous murmur depending on the site of the drainage. The murmur site also changes. In coarctation of aorta, you may hear a collateral murmur. You should look for this murmur in the back because collaterals are most pronounced in the posterior intercostal spaces. Peripheral PS usually causes systolic murmur, rarely it may cause continuous murmur. Other murmurs, to and fro murmurs. To and fro murmurs are originating from the same structure, like AS with AR or PS with PR, whereas systolo-diastolic murmurs occur from different structures, like PST with AR. Here, for both to and fro murmurs and systolo-diastolic murmurs, the character of the murmur changes during systole and diastole. But their differential diagnosis for a continuous murmur because the murmur will be heard throughout systole and diastole. So this is about the clinical findings. Now we move on to salient features of common acyanotic congenital heart diseases. So we'll discuss some 3 shunts and 3 stenotic lesions. Atrial septal defect, most common congenital heart disease in adults seen in 30 to 40%. Ostium secundum being the commonest seen in 75%. Asymptomatic till the 4th decade. Symptoms usually occur after that. Maybe palpitation, fatigue, dyspnea. Atrial arrhythmias may cause right heart failure and systemic embolism. The hallmark of ASD is wide fixed split of the second sound and an ejection systolic murmur in the pulmonary area because of increased flow, which we already discussed. Loud tricuspid component of S1 and mid-diastolic murmur in the tricuspid area indicate a large left shunt. ECG is very characteristic. Majority of the patients, 90 to 95% of the patients with ASD will have RSR dash pattern median, otherwise called incomplete RBBB. Here there is no electrical block in the right bundle branch. It is because of the dilated right ventricle and the right ventricular outflow tract. Other findings are right axis deviation. You might have heard of Crochetard sign. Crochetard sign. There is, you can see here, there is notching of the QRS in 2-3 AVF. This is supposed to be sensitive and specific or large left to right shunt in patients with ostium secundum and sinus venosus defect. Whereas in ostium primum ASD, you get a left axis deviation because of the left anterior fascicle, which is thin and hypoplastic. You may get PR prolongation in patients with the familial ASD and ostium primum ASD. Then other findings could be atrial arrhythmias, various atrial arrhythmias like atrial tachycardia, atrial flutter fibrillation. And in children, sinus arrhythmia is not seen in patients with atrial septal defect. X-ray, you see cardiomegaly of RV type, right ventricle is dilated, right atrium is dilated, main pulmonary artery and branch pulmonary arteries are dilated. You see pulmonary plethora. How do you diagnose pulmonary plethora? You should be able to trace the vessels up to the lateral 1/3, and you will see multiple end-on views. These circle shadows, circular shadows, and multiple end-on views. You should see 3 in one field or 5 or more in 4 fields. VSD, commonest congenital heart disease at birth. Spontaneous closure occurs up to 40%, and most of the small VSDs close. Even large VSDs, 10% of them may spontaneously close, but 90% will not close. Large VSD, as we already discussed, present early in the heart failure, whereas small VSDs have a loud murmur, which may be detected during routine auscultation. They are hemodynamically insignificant and they will not cause any volume overload of the left ventricle or pressure overload of the right. In 2 to 7% of the patients with subaortic or subpulmonic VSD, AR can develop due to prolapse of one of the leaflets, and small percentage, again 3 to 7%, may develop RV obstruction, later presenting like VSD-PS. So the ECG, small VSD, this will be normal. Large VSD can have biventricular hypertrophy, which is manifested by large equiphasic QRS complexes in ventricular leads. It's V2 to V4, where R plus S will be more than 45 millimeter in adults and 60 millimeter in children. So this is called Hart-Schwarzschild phenomenon, classically seen in large, moderate to large VSD or PDA. Coming to PDA, this occurs in 10% of congenital heart disease. Majority are small to moderate. This is more common in people with high altitude because of low oxygen saturation. ECG X-ray, more or less similar to VSD, except that X-ray shows dilated aorta. Ascending aorta and the aortic knuckle will be prominent. Sometimes the duct can get calcified, especially in adults. We call it as cap of Zinn between the aortic knuckle and the pulmonary artery. We see a prominence that is called cap of Zinn. So pulmonary stenosis, classically it's valvular pulmonary stenosis. Clinically, you see a prominent A wave in jugular venous pulse. They will have a phasic ejection clip, and the systolic murmur is kite-shaped. It's a long, as the severity increases, the murmur becomes longer, louder, and late peaking. You can see a kite-shaped murmur in severe pulmonary stenosis. Here you may also hear RVS4 and the white split second sound. The P2 is soft. A2 is engulfed by the murmur. So second sound will be muffled in pulmonary area. Away from that, A2 will be heard. So ECG classically shows RVH with strain pattern, monophasic R waves with ST depression and T motion, which we gone from V1 to V4. There is no sudden transition like in tetralogy of Fallot. So right axis deviation and right atrial enlargement may be other features. Here in pure valvular AS, in the age between 2 to 20 years, if you take the R wave height and multiply it by 5, it gives you the RV systolic pressure, approximate RV systolic pressure. So height of R wave, here suppose it is 5, 10, 15 into 5, becomes around 75. One more thing I want to highlight in PS is, in PS, as the severity increases, murmur becomes longer, louder, late peaking. Whereas in TOP, as the severity increases, the murmur becomes shorter and softer. X-ray. Again, X-ray may be normal, the cardiac size may be normal, but in late stages, there will be right atrial enlargement and right ventricular prominence. MPA and branches are dilated, left more than right, because the jet usually hits the left main pulmonary artery more than the right pulmonary artery. Remember that the pulmonary vascularity is normal in patients even with severe pulmonary stenosis till the RV fails, or there is right to left shunt at the atrial level. If vascularity is maintained, because whatever is the severity of stenosis, RV blood has to go to the pulmonary circulation. With prolonged ejection, the pulmonary vascularity is maintained. Only when the RV fails, or when there is right to left shunt at atrial level because of stretch foramen valve or a atrial septal defect, due to increased RA pressure, that can be stretching of the foramen valve and right to left shunt occur. Then it becomes cyanotic, and it is called as trilogy. So bicuspid aortic valve, most common cause of aortic stenosis and most common congenital heart disease, but they're usually asymptomatic up to 4th decade. There is progressive fibrosis and calcification of aortic valve causing aortic stenosis in the 5th decade or 6th decade. Sometimes they may develop aortic regurgitation. Pure aortic regurgitation is seen in about 15% of the patient. This may be due to leaflet prolapse retraction of the reflex, or these patients are prone for infective endocarditis that can cause acute aortic regurgitation, and sometimes due to aortic root dilatation, which is common in patients with bicuspid aortic valve due to aortopathy. This aortopathy may also lead to aortic aneurysm, dissection, and rupture. So in patients with bicuspid aortic valve, always we should measure the aortic diameter, not only sinuses. More often, here the aortopathy involves the tubular portion of the ascending aorta that is distal to the sinotubular junction. So this is the classical bicuspid aortic valve with aortic stenosis. In aortic stenosis, it's concentric LVH. So you will not get LV dilatation. You get a prominent rounded contour on the left border, but the most striking feature is the ascending aortic dilatation. It's not only post-stenotic, it is due to aortopathy. Finally, coarctation of aorta, usually associated with bicuspid aortic valve, Turner syndrome, may be asymptomatic during early childhood. Some of them may present with heart failure in early life, as I already mentioned, but it may be incidentally detected when you check blood pressure. In young hypertensives, always rule out coarctation of aorta. I once again emphasize, look for the lower limb pulses, lower limb blood pressure whenever you come across a young hypertensive. So ECG may show LVH with strain pattern if they have hypertension, but X-ray will be characteristic. So what is described is cardiomegaly with LV contour, and most important, the figure of 3, where there is dilatation of the left subclavian artery proximally, causes the upper part of 3, and there is coarcted segment. Then you have lower part of the 3 caused by the post-coarctation dilatation. And another important thing is rib notching. In a patient, always when you are given a chest X-ray, you can't find anything. Always look for the rib notching. So the rib notching usually occurs between 3rd to 8th ribs, and usually after 6 years of age. Sometimes rarely as early as 2 years it can be seen, but usually it appears after 6 years of age. It is seen in the posterior ribs because the intercostal arteries run in the lower margin of the posterior intercostal arteries. When they come to the anterior intercostal space, they are more between the ribs rather than the lower margin of the rib. So to conclude, diagnosis of congenital heart disease represents the epitome of applied clinical knowledge. You should have good history, good clinical skill. Most of the lesions can be picked up. You should do accurate observations, and degree of shunt, severity of obstruction, most of them can be fairly assessed by proper history and exam. Thank you.
Madam, there are certain questions in the chat box. Madam, there are a few questions in the chat box.
What are the lesions that can develop suprasystemic pulmonary pressure? The suprasystemic pulmonary pressures in shunt lesions, ASD, you can have suprasystemic PA pressure, whereas in DSD, PDA, suprasystemic pulmonary pressure is not a feature. In other causes for suprasystemic pulmonary hypertension is idiopathic pulmonary hypertension, or pulmonary hypertension in mitral stenosis, and chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension. These are the situations where you can get suprasystemic pulmonary. Management of different congenital heart diseases during pregnancy. During pregnancy, shunt lesions are well tolerated because one side there is increased volume. I hope you all know hemodynamics of pregnancy. Briefly, during pregnancy, cardiac output increases, then heart rate increases. These are not good for a patient with heart disease, but there is a fall in systemic vascular resistance. So shunt lesions are generally well tolerated during pregnancy. Because one side volume increases, other side there is falling systemic vascular resistance. So the shunt is balanced unless there is a large shunt or there is pulmonary hypertension. So in those patients, if they really develop, we had a large patient with a large PDA, who came with failure, so we have to close it during pregnancy. Otherwise, you don't have to do anything during pregnancy. So stenotic lesions, mild to moderate stenotic lesions are well tolerated. Pulmonary stenosis, even if it is severe, it is well tolerated. If they become symptomatic, you can do a balloon valvotomy after the first trimester. Aortic stenosis, severe aortic stenosis is generally a contraindication for pregnancy. Even if they conceive, it's an indication. If symptomatic, it is an indication for termination. Mild to moderate aortic stenosis, will tolerate pregnancy. Regurgitant lesions are again well tolerated in pregnancy, so you don't have to worry. Does it answer your question? What is the common age of presentation? Visualization. Visualization usually occurs, as far as I know, after 1 to 2 years. Exact definition of recurrent respiratory infections. I think yesterday it was discussed. If you attended, they clearly said it is 3 or more lower respiratory infections requiring antibiotic therapy without hospitalization. Cause for ASD to present 4th decade. Actually, I told it. After 4th decade, the arrhythmias, incidence of arrhythmias increases. Atrial fibrillation, but more often there atrial fibrillation. Second, development of mild to moderate pulmonary hypertension. Third, as we grow older, LV compliance decreases. Because LV compliance decreases either because of onset of hypertension or ischemic heart disease, the left duration increases. So these are the 3 reasons mentioned for patients of ASD to become symptomatic after 40 years of age. AV canal defect with the top physiology. LV will have LV dominance. If they have significant AV valve regurgitation, maybe it is LV. What is closing down VSD? Spontaneous closure of VSD is seen in majority of small to moderate sized VSDs. So just before the complete closure occurs, there may be a small left direction that may cause early systolic movement. The mechanisms of spontaneous closure are: 1, formation of a aneurysm. This is classically seen in subaortic VSD or perimembranous VSD, or prolapse of the aortic leaflet, or septal leaflet of the tricuspid bag. Sometimes in muscular VSDs it is direct apposition. So just before it completely closes, there may be a small shunt which may cause a short systolic or early systolic. Wide fixed split in device closure, fixity will not happen. It can be still wide because of dilated pulmonary arteries and increasing hangout interval. In Eisenmenger syndrome, because there is decrease in hangout interval, the split may become narrow, but with the onset of right ventricular failure, again the split becomes wide. Fixity remains even when they develop PH. Yes, fixity remains, but due to decrease in hangout interval, P2 may come closer to A2, so it may become narrow split. But once there is RV failure, again it becomes wide fixed. Causes of suprasystemic pulmonary pressure, already answered. No? ASD with PH, mitral stenosis, idiopathic pulmonary hypertension, and chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension. Bicuspid aortic valve, common presentation in young and old. Many times we have seen them developing severe aortic stenosis requiring balloon aortic valvotomy in children, young adults. But classically, they develop AS in 4th, 5th decade. And some percentage, as I said, 15% of them may develop pure aortic regurgitation. And sometimes they may have combination of AS and AR. As they are more prone for infective endocarditis, they may have acute aortic regurgitation. And if they develop infective endocarditis, they are more prone for perivalvular complications like abscess, pseudoaneurysms. So bicuspid aortic valve is an independent predictor of perivalvular complications. That's aortic valve common presentation. That's it. Difference in JVP between congenital PS and TAU. In congenital PS, that is with intact ventricular septum, when the pulmonary, RV pressure increases, RV end-diastolic pressure increases, then right atrium has to contract forcefully against the resistance. So the right atrial pressure increases. So prominent A waves are seen in intact ventricular septum with severe pulmonary hypertension, pulmonary stenosis. Whereas in TAU, this right ventricular pressure is equal to left ventricular pressure from the beginning. So this RV does not fail usually. So it does not require right atrial boost. So you don't get prominent A waves in tetralogy of Fallot. But in adult fallows, because of prolonged hypoxia of the right ventricular dysfunction will occur and it needs atrial boost. So you may get a prominent A wave. I think it is seen in about 11 or 12% of adult TAF in Abraham series. Prominent A wave in TAF. Adult fallows may have JVP elevation, prominent A waves. They may have heart failure. Generally, in children with the TAF, JVP is normal. So when do they develop JVP elevation? Whenever there is right ventricular failure, especially in adults because of anemia, aortic stenosis, aortic regurgitation, infective endocarditis. In children, it may be due to Hoffman's variant or PSPR, that is absent pulmonary valve. TAF with absent pulmonary valve will have right heart failure. Otherwise, uncomplicated TAF, JVP is normal. First and second intercostal arteries are supplied by the branches of subclavian artery. So you don't get rib notching. From 3rd to 8th, you get rib notching because these are supplied by the descending thoracic aorta. Here we have paradoxic split in PDA with Eisenmenger. Usually in Eisenmenger PDA, it is said that the second sound has physiological split, whereas large PDA with left right shunt, you may have a paradoxic split because of delayed A2 during prolonged ejection time of the left ventricle. But in Eisenmenger syndrome, it is said that second sound will be physiologically split. Whereas in ASD, it will have fixed splitting, VSD, single second sound. That is how you differentiate three of these. ASD, fixed, narrow, or wide split second sound. VSD Eisenmenger, you have single second sound. PDA Eisenmenger, there will be normal, physiological split. That means during inspiration, two sounds, during expiration, single sound. Cause of CAG, bicuspid aortic valve, VSD, cause of a bicuspid aortic valve is the most common. That is not included in what I said, 8 to 10 per thousand libels. But among, if you exclude the bicuspid aortic valve, it is VSD. VSD is the most common. Oh, you got confused with it. Bicuspid aortic valve is the most common congenital heart disease, which occurs in 1 to 2% of the population. Next common at birth is VSD, occurs in 30% of the newborns. Then in adults, because VSDs, most of them get closed or most of them they get operated. In adults, ASD is the most common congenital heart disease seen in 30 to 40. If you take in adults 100 patients with congenital heart disease, ASD is the most common. At birth, VSD is the most common. That is excluding bicuspid valve. But overall, bicuspid aortic valve is the most common congenital heart disease. The congenital heart disease occurs in nearly 1% of the newborns. So in that VSD is not common. Is it clear? Why there is persistent void and fixed it after a device explosion? No, it is not fixed. Void split occurs because of the pulmonary arteries are still dilated. So even after surgery, even after surgical closure of ASD, you can get a void split because of the dilated pulmonary arteries and the hangout interval is increased. I hope you all know what is hangout interval. Hangout interval is the distance between the pressure crossover of the great artery with the respective ventricle and the actual closure of the valve. So this depends on the compliance and capacitance of the great artery. In pulmonary circulation, hangout interval is more because pulmonary arteries are more compliant and more capacitance, has more capacity. So in ASD, it is even after surgery, pulmonary arteries are still dilated, so you can get a wide split second sound. But fixity depends on the shunt. The fixity may not be there. Wide variable split may be still there after surgical closure or device closure. VST and AR, when they present usually. See, AR occurs usually, it starts after 5 to 8 years of age and it progresses. They may present during second decade or third decade because it progressively increases. So this occurs in small VSDs. AR is not common in large VSDs. It occurs in small VSDs because of the Venturi effect. The small jets from LV to, when it goes from LV to pulmonary artery, it gets the leaflet gets sucked. There is basically deficiency or lack of support to the leaflet. More commonly known is the right coronary cusp and less common non-coronary cusp. So this more commonly occurs in subpulmonic VSD and less commonly subaortic VSD. So it's more common in males and starts after 5 to 8 years of age and it progresses and then clinically present during after first decade or second decade with symptoms of volume overload. VSD is small, so usually they will not have symptoms of VSD. Once they develop significant severe AR, they have symptoms of volume overload, they may have effort intolerance, fatigue, and they develop organ dysfunction. Otherwise, palpitation is a common symptom because it is volume overload. Earlier symptom is palpitation, later they will develop symptoms of fatigue. Apart from JLT, what other features are different in adult dog from juvenile dog? Oh, there are a lot of differences. I think you need to read the article by Abraham series, which is published in American Journal of Medicine, I think. If you want, you can forward that. Briefly, I can tell because why do they live up to that age? That is because less severe aortic obstruction and collaterals. So the incidence of symptoms during early life is less. So history of squatting is less common, but they may have prominent areas, as I said, they may have right heart failure. Sometimes the second sound may be split, you may hear a P2. And in that series, about 43 points